China is next up on the American sanctions escalator. Yeah, China, well, actually, China has been sanctioned already for a couple of years with the, prohibitions about semiconductors and other stuff that's going on like that. But, like the real sanctions, the real, like, disconnecting China from SWIFT and all kinds of nonsense like that, right? That's coming up. We still have maybe a year or so before that starts to happen. But of course, it'll depend on how the situation in the United States develops. If the economic financial collapse accelerates, as I personally anticipate, it could be that the whole China situation gets on deck a lot sooner. But that's not important. What I want to talk about in this video is the psychology of sanctions. It's kind of interesting and it's rather indicative of the mentality of the leadership. You see, because your actions express priorities. Your actions express your outlook on life and what you consider important and what you think matters to your opposing number. You see, what's the point of sanctions? See, the point of economic sanctions is, of course, as the name implies, to hurt somebody's economy. But, of course, that presupposes that your economy is the most important thing in your nation. Yeah, I mean, think about it. See, if I'm country A and you're country B and I impose economic sanctions on you, it's because I think that that's going to hurt you the most. That's assuming, on my part, that for you, money is all that matters. Money is the most important thing that matters to you. Now, when it comes to nation states, of course, that would presuppose that money, the economy, the state of your economy matters more to you than, say, the social cohesion of your nation, say the spiritual welfare of your nation, or other priorities that a nation might have. Perhaps you're military, perhaps you are a highly militaristic society, and for you, the economy is not that important, but having a really great military, that matters. You see my point. Sanctions express the priority that the American leadership places on the economy, which is kind of ironic considering that the American economy is going down the tubes, man. I mean, look what's been going on the markets as of late, and look at the trade imbalance that's just been declared. The unemployment numbers, the inflation figures. Yeah, it's pretty damn funny. But anyway, to get back to the point, the American leadership thinks that every other nation cares about its economy over everything else. Nothing else matters as much as the economy, and that's why they go to sanctions first. And also, if you think of what sanctions are, what are they? They are an instrument of exclusion. You are cutting somebody off from global trade. It's the kind of mentality of, frankly, teenage girls. Ooh, you've got cooties, so I'm not going to, hang out with you, and I'm not going to let you hang out with our cool girls clique. That's basically the mentality of sanctions. It's basically trying to exclude one nation from global trade to hurt their economy, but also on a political level to make them feel, quote unquote, isolated. Which doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense if you think of geography. And if you think of the health of a nation. See, the global community, it's this amorphous thing. And when you are a nation, you're concerned about your own well-being, the welfare of your own people. And the welfare not only of your own people, but also of your neighboring countries, the ones that are adjacent to you. You don't really care about the global opinion of the global community because, that's just an amorphous nothingness. All that really matters to you is, number one, what your people think of what you're doing as a government, and number two, what your neighbors think of you, and whether they're going to decide to attack you or not, or trade with you or not, or have cordial relationships with you or not. I mean, that's what matters. And so you see how sanctions really reveal how the Washington globalist elite, because do keep in mind, the leaders of the Western democracies, people like, Trudeau and Freeland in Canada, Schultz in Germany, Boris Johnson in the UK, Emmanuel Macron in France, all of these people, they are all members of this globalist community. And to be excluded from that globalist community means professional death to them. And so they are a part of this global community that involves not just the World Economic Forum. Everybody fixates on Klaus Schwab, probably because he looks like a James Bond villain, but they fix on Klaus Schwab and his stupid little group, the World Economic Forum. But it goes far beyond that. It goes to being, an alumni of the right universities. It means going to the right think tanks or working with the right think tanks, It is a whole cornucopia of institutions. And it's very important for you as a member of this establishment to belong to all of these institutions, or at least be in good standing with them. You can't be excluded from them, because if you are excluded, your career goes nowhere. If you are excluded from power. And so that's why for these people, sanctions are so important. Because, see, they reflect their own preoccupations. They are worried that if I, as a potential leader of these nations, of the Western nations, of the American empire and the American imperial allies, if I'm excluded, then I go nowhere, then I'm dead meat. So I don't want to be excluded, and therefore I project my own insecurities onto other nations and think that they must be very frightened of being excluded. And so you see why this didn't work with the Russians, because the Russians don't care about being excluded. They don't care. they think it's stupid. Okay? And that's why the Russians are doing so well insofar as the whole sanctions thing is concerned, and why the West is just completely confused. The Europeans are getting ready for yet another sanctions package, which of course, it's not merely diminishing returns at this point, it's non-existent returns. Who are they going to sanction? Putin's little puppies or something like that? Come on. There's nothing left to sanction, and yet that's the only thing that they gravitate to, that they have to sanction Russia some more, not realizing that those sanctions actually hurt them. I've discussed it previously, so I'm not going to discuss it in this video, but the point I want to emphasize, and it's to understand and underscore the psychology of these people and how they operate. And it's important because then you understand their weakness. Their weakness is groupthink, because they are also worried about belonging to the right groups, the right organizations, being members of that group, that they all think the same. They can't think outside of a box. They're just like teenage girls. Yeah. I mean, you've probably dealt with teenage girls. When you were a teenager, you remember them. I certainly did. I remember all these little cliques when I was in 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, and a little bit older too. They'd all think the same. They were like flocks of geese. They'd go here, they'd go there, and they would all say the same thing, the same inane, nonsensical conversations, just like the leaders of the West today. And once you understand them, once you understand that they are basically teenage girls, you understand how vulnerable they are to misinformation, how vulnerable they are to groupthink, how vulnerable they are to carrying out terrible decisions, because none of them want to disagree. They might all realize that some decision is a terrible decision, but not a one of them will want to disagree, because they won't want to be excluded, and so they will remain silent, even as they all realize what a horrible decision is being made. And this has enormous consequences when you're talking about nations with nuclear weapons. Yeah. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about, the psychology of sanctions.